Chapter 4. She wasn't serious, was she? Nina frowned. Her forehead wrinkled whenever she was thinking hard, and the freckles around her nose seemed to wrinkle too. Was she? Abby laughed. I don't know, Nina, I really don't. Nina held the steaming gray coffee up to her lips and blew on it. She stared into Abby's eyes as if the answer to her question was somehow hidden inside them. Stop looking at me like that, Abby said and laughed again. Nina was so serious about this it was comical. No, I don't think Andrea was serious. I don't think she really wants us to commit a crime. Is that what you want me to say? She is serious, Nina decided, setting the cup down too hard on the green formica tabletop. She pulled a napkin from the dispenser and began wiping up the brown puddle of coffee she had spilled. You still have these tiny hands, Abby said without thinking. As soon as she said it, she remembered that Nina was sensitive about the size of her hands. Nina looked hurt for a second, but quickly changed her expression. Hands don't grow, she said, tossing the wet napkin in an ashtray. It's a scientific fact. It's a scientific fact. I don't believe it, Abby thought. Nina was saying that when she was 10. Abby found herself grinning at her old friend. A flood of warm feelings rushed over her. It was good to be sitting here at Ernie's coffee shop on a Monday night, talking comfortably with someone she had known for so many years. The small, dimly lit room was nearly empty. A group of old men sat at the counter, staring vacantly at the wall, their bony white hands wrapped around half-empty coffee cups. In the corner booth, across the room from Abby and Nina, a boy and girl in identical denim jackets were wrapped around each other and seemed to be challenging the world's record for the longest kiss. Their sandwiches sat untouched in front of them. Abby looked back at Nina. She couldn't be serious. Nina decided, changing her mind again. She sure looked serious, but she couldn't mean it, Abby. She couldn't expect us to commit a crime to get accepted into the sorority, could she? Whatever it is, it'll be completely harmless, Abby said. Sororities always make their pledges to do silly things. It'll be silly, that's all. Silly, yeah, I'm sure you're right, Nina said, but she didn't look or sound convinced. Hey, did you get to talk to Layla? Yeah, a little, Abby forced a smile. She said hi, and I said hi, and then some other girl asked for a question that was that. She looks great, doesn't she? Nina asked. It was her first great of the conversation, Abby realized. I love what she's done to her hair. She looks just like that model, you know the one. Abby didn't know the one, but she nodded anyway. Do you still keep up with all the gossip about the models and their love lives and everything? Abby asked. Nina giggled. A little, she admitted guiltily. Not as much as I used to. I don't still plan to be a famous model when I grow up, if that's what you're asking. They both laughed. It was a little like the old days years ago, but then neither could think of what to say next. I'm a little worried about Layla, Nina said suddenly, wrinkling her forehead again. What do you mean? Oh, I probably shouldn't say anything, especially to you. Abby's heart began to pound. It's okay, she said quietly, trying not to look too interested. Well, I don't know. It's about Layla and Gordon. Nina sipped her coffee and made a face. Ooh, bitter. Abby shoved the sugar container across the table to her a little too vigorously. It almost toppled into Nina's lap, but she caught it at the table edge. Sorry. Nina quickly dumped 3 spoons of sugar into her coffee. I'm sure I'll like the taste of coffee someday, she said. What was I talking about? Layla and Gordon, Abby said a little too loudly. But Nina didn't seem to notice. I just don't think Gordon is right for Layla at this point in her life, Nina said. Here she is in her first semester at Rockland, and he's just nowhere. No job, no school, no plans, and he doesn't seem to care. I'm just afraid he's going to drag her down with him. What do you mean? Abby asked, staring into her coffee cup, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. Suddenly felt ice cold. Oh, well, I wouldn't tell you this if we all weren't such old friends. I had a study date with some kids in another dorm the other night, and I was walking back to my dorm. It was really late, after midnight. The doors closed at 12:15, and I was crossing through the parking lot, behind the dorm, and there was that old car that Gordon drives parked by the fence. I guess I was surprised to see it there so late or something. I had to walk right by it, and as I walked by, I looked in the car, and they were there, inside, in the back seat, in the dorm parking lot. Can you imagine? That parking lot is pretty well lit up. Do you know how much trouble Layla could be in if the campus cops came by or something? She could be kicked out of school. Do you think I should say something to her? Should I? Nina stopped when she saw Abby's face. Abby felt her face growing bright red. She knew there was nothing she could do about that. She struggled to get her trembling lips and chin under control, but it was a losing battle. Abby's words came through clenched teeth in a hard, cold voice she had never heard before. Layla's a big girl. She can take care of herself. Startled, Nina dropped her cup onto its saucer. Oh, I'm spilling more than I'm drinking. She reached for another paper napkin. Listen, Abby, I'm sorry, really. I guess it was dumb of me to think. No. Abby started to protest, still unable to stop her quivering face. She was just about to tell Nina to go on, to tell her more, when they were interrupted by a loud, cheerful voice. Well, so this is where the in-crowd hangs out. Hi. It was Jessie, the girl who had arrived late at the pledge meeting and had asked about the sandwiches. She dropped her book back to the floor and, without removing her bulky poncho, began to slide uninvited next to Abby in the booth. You girls were at the pledge meeting, right? I'm Jessie Harvard, like the university. She grabbed Abby's cold hand and squeezed it, then reached across the table to shake Nina's hand. I'm Nina, and this is Abby. Abby was tempted to tell Jessie she was interrupting their conversation. As much as it was hurting her, she wanted desperately to hear more about Layla and Gordon. But she and Nina both were reluctant to be rude to a fellow Trigam pledge. Besides, what would be the point? Jessie was already sitting down, already calling to the waiter behind the counter to bring her a grilled cheese and french fries, already pulling that hideous poncho over her head. So what do you think? Jessie asked, grinning first at Abby, then at Nina. They both just stared at her. Nina was the first to recover. Do you think Andrea was telling the truth? Do you think the crime thing is for real? Jessie raised an ink-stained finger to her lips. Shh, we're not supposed to talk about it, remember? She said loudly. She seemed incapable of talking below a shout. I know, Nina whispered, but what do you think? Jessie raised her head and looked around the coffee shop. The two old men had climbed off their stools and were standing in front of the broken Pac-Man machine in the back. The couple in the back booth still had their lips glued together. I think it's going to happen, Jessie said, smiling, and I can't wait. Her dull gray eyes suddenly lit up. I've always dreamed of pulling off some kind of heist, maybe getting into a big chase scene. Do you think we'll get to use guns? Are you for real? Nina blurted out. She was sorry immediately that she had said it. After all, she didn't know Jessie at all. Jessie didn't seem at all taken aback by the question. Abby figured that people asked her that question all the time. Haven't you ever wanted to live a fantasy? Jessie asked. To live another life? A wild life? A life of adventure? Of crime? Haven't you ever dreamed of doing something bad? Really bad? Well, here comes our chance. Good Lord, thought Abby. This girl is definitely twisted. She's so excited about committing a crime, she's practically drooling on the table. Abby looked at her watch. Hey, it's getting late. I told my mom I'd be home, so... You live at home? So do I, Jessie said, her face still animated from talking about the crime they were going to commit. Where'd you go to school? North Shore, Abby said, looking at Nina. Oh, I went to South Shore, Jessie said, a little defensively. South Shore was the less affluent of the two villages, populated largely by the people who worked for the homeowners in North Shore. Yeah, guess we better be going, Nina said, getting up quickly and pulling her jacket on. Oh, okay, Abby agreed a bit too enthusiastically. Gee, I just got here, Jessie said, disappointed. She slowly pulled herself out of the booth so that Abby could slide out. Well, nice meeting you two. Nice meeting you, Abby and Nina called back. They were already hurrying out the door. They stepped out onto the sidewalk. The air smelled fresh and cool. They looked at each other and started laughing. She's going to be a trigam, Nina exclaimed. She is definitely weird, Abby said. Looking through the smeared coffee shop window, they saw Jessie sitting in the booth alone, still waiting for her food. She was toying with a knife, twirling it between her fingers, and she had the strangest smile on her face. Chapter 5. Hi, Layla. I was hoping you'd be here. Nina pulled off her down vest and red wool muffler and tossed them across the small, cluttered dorm room onto her unmade bed. She leaned against the door and tried to catch her breath. Oh, wow, I ran all the way. She couldn't wait to tell Layla about Abby and hear Layla's opinion of the pledge meeting. Layla stood in the middle of the room, hands on her waist, her thumbs tucked into the belt loops of her dress, glaring at Nina. She hadn't changed into more comfortable clothes, even though it was nearly 2 hours since the meeting had ended. Where have you been? She asked, sounding more like an angry parent than a roommate. Hey, what's wrong? Nina asked, taking a few steps away from the door. Where have you been? Layla repeated without moving or changing her angry expression. Uh-oh, Nina thought. She'd seen Layla angry before. She always started off quietly with clenched teeth and a cold, hard stare that could cut through steel, and then she'd explode. Nina could never figure out why Layla thought she had the right to get so furious at her friends. Maybe it was because she was an only child and never really had to control her temper, Nina thought. She lifted a stack of books off the room's only armchair and sat down, preparing herself for the explosion to come. I went for coffee with Abby, she said, trying to stare back at Layla, but looking down at the brown shag rug instead. That figures, Layla said, moving her thumbs furiously back and forth through the wide belt loops at her sides. What do you mean? Nina cried, trying not to sound whiny upset. What are you bent out of shape about? It figures that you'd go out for coffee with my biggest enemy in the world. Enemy? Despite her attempts to keep it down, Nina's voice rose several octaves. Layla, what happened between you and Abby? That was at least a year ago. I'm sure Abby has forgotten all. No one has forgotten anything, Layla said. Now there was more sadness than anger in her voice. Tears formed in her eyes. She shook her head hard, as if trying to shake away her feelings. She hates me, Layla cried. Abby hates me, and I don't blame her. I have Gordon, and she doesn't. Don't you remember anything, Nina? Doesn't anything ever penetrate that little girl world you live in? Abby was so upset when Gordon decided he liked me better. Her mother had to take her out of school for nearly a year. She told everyone that Abby had gone to live with her grandmother for a while. I remember, Nina said quietly, her eyes still on the small brown rug. It was a long time ago. Abby's okay now, really. I haven't forgotten, Layla screamed. Believe me, Abby hasn't either. I just had coffee with her. I didn't. Nina hated herself for sounding so apologetic. She had every right to have coffee with anyone she wanted to. Struggling to control her anger, she squeezed the worn arms of the chair until her knuckles turned white. Layla, you can't be angry because I had a cup of coffee with Abby. What's really bugging you? Nina expected the question to catch Layla off guard, to interrupt her fury for just a second, but it only seemed to make Layla angrier. She raised a hand up, tossed her long braid behind her shoulder, and swung around. She took 3 quick steps to her dresser, picked up a small brown leather case, and tossed it as hard as she could at Nina. Here, I got you a present. Hey, don't, Nina cried, ducking away. The case hit the arm of Nina's chair and bounced onto the rug at her feet. Go ahead, pick it up, Layla challenged from across the room. Nina leaned forward and reached for it, keeping her eyes on her roommate. What is it? The perfect gift for you. Binoculars. Nina dropped the case as if it were hot and sat back in the chair. What's with you, Layla? What are you talking about? Layla's beautiful heart-shaped mouth curled into a sneer. They're for spying, Nina. Perfect for you. The next time you want to spy on Gordon and me, you'll get a much better view. Layla glared at Nina. I'm hurt, Nina, she said. I'm so hurt. Nina felt a stab of pain behind her eyes, so Layla had seen her in the parking lot. Listen, Layla, I wasn't spying. I was walking back to the room. I couldn't help it if what? Layla demanded. If you stopped and watched us for 20 minutes? I did not, Nina screamed. She could feel herself losing control now, and she didn't care. Why were you in the parking lot, Layla? What were you trying to do? You're so crazy about Gordon you don't care what happens to you. You don't care about anything. You're jealous. That's it. Since Nina was the one screaming now, Layla lowered her voice into an angry whisper. You're just jealous. Why don't you admit it? You've never even had a boyfriend, have you? Have you? The stab of pain behind her eyes had become a full-fledged headache. Nina rubbed her eyes, tried to rub away the pain. I don't have to answer that. You don't have to do anything, Layla said, her voice still a shuddering whisper. She grabbed her fur coat off her bed with a violent sweep of her hand and started quickly toward the door. But one of us has to leave. I'm not rooming with a spy, an enemy. Layla, stop. Just stop. This is ridiculous. We have to talk this out. There's nothing more to say, Layla said. She slammed the door behind her. For a long time after Layla left, Nina sat in the armchair staring down at the binocular case, trying to rub away her headache. This just wasn't fair, she thought. How could Layla do this to her? She had looked forward to this night for so long. The first pledge meeting of the Trigams, and 2 of her oldest friends were there with her. It should have been exciting. It should have been fun. She buried her head in her arm and fought to keep back the tears. Why didn't anything ever work out the way she imagined it would? The front door clicked quietly as Abby closed it behind her and stepped into the living room. The house was dark and silent. She stood by the door for a long while, smiling and listening to the silence. She was relieved that her mother had gone to bed. She didn't really feel like telling her about the meeting or about seeing Nina and Layla. The air was thick and pungently sweet. Abby remembered a vase of wilting flowers on the coffee table she had forgotten to toss out. The scent was bringing back a memory. Where was it? Where was she when she had smelled that same decaying flower smell? What are you smiling about? The loud voice so close to her made Abby cry out. Gabriella, I didn't know you were... Why are you sitting in the dark? Gabriella laughed. She enjoyed startling her sister. I like the dark. It's pitch black in here, Abby said, her heart still pounding. How can you see me smiling? I know you, Gabriella said mysteriously. Well, don't sneak up on me like that, Abby said angrily. Gabriella laughed again, a deep, thrilly laugh. Tell me about the meeting. Why, so you can make fun of it? Abby said Abby had no patience for Gabriella. She just wanted to go up to her room, lie down in her bed, and sift through her thoughts. She needed to figure out how she felt about everything that had happened, to put everything in order in her mind. Me? Make fun of you? Gabriella said innocently. Really, Gabriella, I'm in no mood for your sarcasm, Abby said, keeping her voice down so she wouldn't wake her mother. And I don't want to fight with you. Me either, Gabriella said. She reached to turn on the lamp. Don't turn that on. I'm going right to bed, Abby told her. Come on, tell me everything. No, stop. Abby started toward the stairs. Then just tell me one thing, Gabriella said. Gabriella, please. Why was her sister always such a pest? Just tell me what you think about the crime, Gabriella said, suddenly whispering. Are you wanting to do it? Do you think it's for real? Good night, Abby said, ignoring the questions, and don't follow me. She began running quickly up the stairs. She stopped near the top landing. How did Gabriella know about the crime? She wasn't at the meeting. How did she know? Abby didn't have a chance to find out the answer. She climbed the rest of the stairs, flicked on the light in her room, and found someone waiting for her there. Chapter 6. Gordon? What are you doing here? Abby's voice came out tiny and choked. She looked shocked she looked shocked enough to scream. Gordon lifted himself off her bed quickly, stepped forward, and clamped a hand gently over her mouth. His hand felt rough and hot. Shh, Abby, don't scream, he whispered. Then slowly he removed his hand. For an instant she realized she wanted him to keep it there. She took a step back. Gordon, I don't believe this. Shh. He grinned at her, his face inches from hers. She took another step back, turned, and closed the bedroom door. How did you get in? Still grinning, he pointed to the window. Climbed, he said. Then he shrugged. She stared at him, trying to make sure it was really him, not a look-alike, not a ghost, not a daydream figure come to life, a figure sprung from her overactive imagination. But Gordon was too big to be an illusion. He was tall, over 6 feet, and muscular, built like a football player, although he never played. His jeans were faded and torn at one knee. His sweatshirt had a grease stain down the left sleeve. It looked as if he'd been wearing it for weeks. Gordon's brown hair was long and fell in unwashed disarray nearly to his shoulders. Patches of dark stubble dotted his jutting jaw. His narrow blue eyes, set a bit too close to his nose, still seemed to be mocking everything they saw. He still looks like Sean Penn, Abby decided, like a big, unwashed Sean Penn. As she stared at him, he seemed to lose confidence. His grin faded. He shoved his big hands into his jeans pockets. He glanced back at the window from which he had entered, as if maybe he was thinking about leaving. How long have you been here? Abby whispered. A while. How did you know What made you think, Layla? He said, looking at the window again. He never was much of a talker, Abby remembered. But these one-word answers were driving her bananas. Well, what do you want? She asked impatiently. Her sharpness seemed to hurt him. He shrugged again. It was his turn to stare at her. I had to explain. She waited for him to go on, but he didn't. Looking at him in the shadowy light from the small lamp on her bed table, she felt all mixed up, attracted to him, repelled by him, frightened of him. If only he would talk. Gordon, you had to explain what? He picked up a lipstick on her dressing table and then put it back without looking at it. You know, I felt bad. You came to apologize to me? He picked up the lipstick again and began twirling it between his long fingers. Well, yeah, I guess. Explain. Apologize, you know. Abby angrily grabbed the lipstick from his hand and slammed it on the tabletop. There's nothing to explain, Gordon. Go home, okay? His eyes went back to the window. Come on, Abby. I'll go in a second. I don't know. Last year, I was just immature, I guess. I mean, I wasn't ready. I didn't mean to hurt you or anything. Well, you did hurt me. A lot. She surprised herself with this bitter reply, surprised and frightened herself. There were feelings she'd long held deep down that she wanted to keep deep down. I know, that's why I came to apologize. Gordon's voice trembled. She'd never heard him sound so real. Her mind flashed suddenly on the night he had burned his foot. She pictured the bonfire, the kids in their down coats, mufflers, bright woolly gloves, their faces glowing orange and red, reflecting the blazing, crackling fire, the cheerleaders, the happy voices, the chants and cheers echoing off the stadium wall. Was it homecoming or just a big pep rally? No, it was homecoming that Gordon had decided to pull his goofy, stupid stunt. She could see him clearly. She was standing so close to the fire when he did it. She saw him take a running start, heard him screaming, Geronimo! At the top of his lungs, saw his wild face, his crazy eyes, and realized at once that he planned to leap over the fire. Stop him! She had yelled. but no one could hear her over the cheering, the laughter, the happy shouts. Geronimo! She saw him leap, her gasps of surprise, then gasps of horror. His shoe was on fire. Crazy fool, crazy Gordon. He rolled on the stadium grass. They stomped it out. They found a tarp to cover him. It must have hurt like crazy, but crazy Gordon never let on. He never cried out. He never uttered a word. It was unreal. Crazy macho Gordon couldn't let on that he was in pain. He had a little bit of a limp now, but the foot was okay. If it hurt him, he still never let on. Why was Abby remembering all this? Because now he was letting on. Now he was being real. Anyway, he said, his voice still unsteady, that's all, I guess. She took a step toward him, then another. She threw her arms around his neck and pushed her lips, burning lips, against his. Am I really doing this? She thought. And then she stopped thinking. She closed her eyes and kissed him harder, again, tightening her arms around his neck. Gordon stepped back, tried to pull away, but soon he was returning her kiss. Oh, she told herself. If Layla ever finds out, she'll kill me. Chapter 7. The house set back in the woods at the end of the Dune Road could have been the setting for the Amityville Horror or some other horror movie. The bus bumped up the rutted dirt driveway past gnarled old trees that shivered and entwined around each other as if they were afraid of the dark. The headlights cut through the thick fog, providing the only light. From her window seat, Abby could see a shadowy carpet of leaves on the ground, shifting, rolling, separating as if invisible creatures were running over them. Her first glimpse of the house, so dark, so rambling and run down, so eerily perched on the desolate, forested dune, gave her a growing feeling of dread. Couldn't we stay at the Holiday Inn? Jessie called from the back of the bus. A few girls laughed, short, nervous laughs. But most of them had already learned to ignore Jessie's loud remarks and odd attempts at humor. The engine whined as the bus began to climb the final steep incline that curved up to the front of the house. Abby held her watch up close to her face and struggled to steady it and read it in the dark. 10:15. The ride from the Trigam house had seemed really long, partly because of heavy traffic on the expressway, partly because of Jessie's insistence on trying to make funny comments about everything they passed, and partly because of the uncertainty of where they were going and what they were about to do. Come on, people, it's time to prove that you're Trigams, was all Andrea had said back on the campus as she ushered them up onto the old yellow minibus. They'd had no idea they'd been heading out to the ocean and to this deserted wreck of a mansion so far from town, so far from anything. But the uncertainty of their destination wasn't the only cause of attention on the bus. Abby saw immediately that Nina and Layla weren't speaking to each other. Upon boarding, Layla had flashed Nina a real look of hate, a look so intense it actually made Abby turn her head away. I hope no one ever looks at me that way, Abby told herself. Then she remembered Gordon that night in her room. Was it a week ago already? His kisses, in between the kisses, his words of apology, of regret. If Layla only knew. Abby said to herself, she would hate me too. But what were Layla and Nina fighting about? Probably some silly squabble about their dorm room, Abby thought. She couldn't picture the two of them living together at all. Layla was so tidy and neat, so together, so cool and sophisticated, and Nina was always such a slob, such a kid. As they boarded the rented mini-school bus, Layla walked past Nina, flashed Abby a quick, phony smile, and kept walking down the narrow aisle, taking a seat near the back. Rebecca climbed in beside Nina. The two of them began chattering and laughing, their high, scratchy voices reminding Abby of those cartoon chipmunks on TV. A girl named Emily introduced herself and sat and took the seat beside Abby. She was quite pretty in an ordinary, everyday, pretty kind of way. She seemed gung-ho about everything, loved Rockland State, loved the Trigams, loved her courses, loved the other pledges, loved the North Shore, loved the idea of going off somewhere to commit a crime. She thought it was all a lark, just a fun sorority prank, and she loved the whole idea. Abby tried to keep a conversation going with Emily, but it was hard to keep up the level of enthusiasm it took to talk to such a tirelessly cheerful person. The silences became longer and more awkward, and soon both girls gave up and stared out the bus window, watching the fog settle on the sides of the expressway. A lot of the girls were finding it difficult to make conversation. It was hard to keep the purpose of the trip from their minds. They weren't off on a fun vacation trip, a weekend frolic. Before the weekend was out, they were supposed to commit a crime, a serious crime, according to Andrea, who would be accompanying them, watching them, not only an accomplice but a judge. 3 girls had refused to come along and had simply given up their chances of becoming Trigams. Most of the remaining 7, judging from the conversations Abby overheard on the bus, believed the whole thing to be a goof, a joke they had to play along with to prove they were good sports. Only Jessie, of course, seemed excited about actually having the chance to commit a crime. How did Abby feel about it? She tried to sort out her thoughts as the bus rumbled along the expressway, but she couldn't come to any decision. She felt uncomfortable. That was all. They were nearing the end of the expressway, the final exit, where they would turn onto the local road that led to the Dune Road, when the bus suddenly squealed to a stop. Traffic normally wasn't heavy this far out of town. What could be tying things up? Staring through the billowing fog, Abby could make out a car on the side of the road. Its headlights were on high beam. Its doors had been flung open. The 2 occupants of the car, a large man in a bulky tan overcoat and a young boy, were in front of the car in the glare of the white headlights, and they were hunched over what appeared to be a huge brown sack. No, wait, it wasn't a sack they were examining. Abby stared harder. It was an animal, a deer. "Oh no, it's dead. They killed it," Abby heard Nina cry out. A few other girls uttered cries of surprise and revulsion. The deer must have run out onto the highway and the car had struck it. Now it lay on its side, unmoving, a dead heap, nothing but a big brown sack. The man and the boy were walking around it now, still hunched over, shaking their heads. "Oh, look, a deer crossing sign right next to it," Jessie called out. "Isn't that ironic?" "Jessie, really?" Andrea called from her seat beside the bus driver. No one else said anything. The traffic began to move again. The bus jerked forward, backfired, jerked again, and then began to move away. Abby kept picturing this innocent creature taking a quick, clean leap onto the highway and then thud. She felt worse than uncomfortable now. This is where her feelings of dread began, long before she saw the spooky old mansion on the dune. Again and again she saw the innocent creature, the leap, the hit. The girls on this bus are all innocent creatures too, she told herself. Hey, Abby, such weird thoughts. Don't lose control, girl. Got to get to control. She forced herself to stop thinking about it, think about Jordan instead. She could change her thoughts, but she couldn't rid herself of the feelings that crept up from the pit of her stomach, that tightened the muscles in the back of her neck, that made her shiver even though it was hot and steamy inside the bus. Now the long, uncomfortable ride was over and they were inside the old mansion. Close the door. Don't let the cold in, Andrea yelled. She flicked a row of switches, and the whole house seemed to light up. Abby smiled, happy to be out of the darkness. The house wasn't as bad as the outside had led them to believe. It was well lit and cheerfully decorated with surprisingly modern, comfortable-looking furniture, and it was warm and dry. She took a few steps into the living room and looked beyond it to a long dining room. Not bad, she thought. No broken windows, no creaking floorboards, no bats, or creepy-looking housekeepers appearing out of nowhere. Maybe this won't be a horror show after all, Abby thought, unsnapping her down jacket. If the Trigams were going to take you out to a deserted mansion to commit a crime, at least they did it in style and comfort. Okay, people, Andrea herded everyone into the big living room. I have the room assignments here. She pulled a yellow sheet of paper from her coat pocket. The driver will bring in your bags. Your rooms are all upstairs. I think you can find them yourselves. She began to read her list. Nina and Rebecca were rooming together. Emily and a very quiet girl named Ruby were roommates for the night. Abby felt the dread returning. What if? Layla and Abby in room 212, Andrea said. It had happened. She and Layla. No. Should she say something? But what? What excuse could she give for not wanting to room with Layla? She glanced over at Layla, who smiled back at her, a warm smile that seemed almost genuine. Oh well, it's just for a night or two. They could just avoid talking about anything real. It wouldn't be so bad. She smiled back at Layla. Wait just a daggone minute here, someone was yelling. Who would talk like that? Abby looked around. Oh, it was Jessie. Wait a daggone minute, Jessie repeated. I need my privacy. What? What do you mean? Andrea tried not to sound exasperated, but she couldn't help it. I need my own room, to myself, Jessie said, as if Andrea should have understood it from the beginning. There were giggles and whispered remarks around the big living room, all of them at Jessie's expense. Andrea stared at her list. Okay, Jessie, room 233 is empty because Charlotte and Ruth decided not to join us. You can have that room. Good, Jessie said, as if an injustice had been righted. Get some sleep, guys, Andrea said, folding up the list and jamming it back into her coat pocket. Tomorrow we have some important scouting to do. The girls all headed toward the stairway. Layla, still smiling warmly, leaned against the mahogany banister and waited for Abby. Abby tried to smile back, but her mouth wouldn't cooperate. Hi, Layla. I guess we... I hope we don't plan to have a long chat tonight, Layla said, covering a yawn with her hand. Abby couldn't help but notice her perfect long blood-red fingernails. I'm totally wrecked. No, I mean, so am I. Abby hoped she didn't sound too grateful. Maybe we can catch up on each other's lives tomorrow, Layla said, actually sounding friendly. I just can't keep my eyes open. I guess it was the bus ride. I don't know. Fine, great, Abby said, feeling a little silly. She followed Layla up the long staircase to their room. This trip has already had one surprise, Abby thought. Layla was nice to me. A few minutes later, she fell asleep, wondering what other surprises were in store. In the summertime, vacationers and summer people filled the narrow main street of the little town, trying on bathing suits and chic summer gear in the trendy boutiques with names like Seaworthy and Dune Fine, buying backward furniture, pastel-shaded posters, and barbecue grills for their summer houses, and lunching on shrimp salad and pasta in the outdoor cafes and small restaurants. But in the fall, the streets were nearly empty. The summer people had packed up their bikes and tennis gear and gone home, and most of the stores were closed and boarded up. It's so empty, it's almost like a movie, Layla said to Abby as they crossed the Carla Street. Layla was being super friendly to Abby. Abby was relieved. Layla's easygoing chit-chat, as if the two of them were the best of friends, as if nothing had happened between them, was making the weekend a lot easier. Look at those dogs, Abby said, laughing. Two scraggly black mutts were lying on their backs in the middle of Main Street, looking as if they owned the town. Try to keep up, Andrea called from up ahead. The girls obediently quickened their pace. Andrea had the driver park the bus at the big lot at the edge of town near the railroad tracks, even though there were parking places all up and down Main Street. I want to walk you through town so you can memorize where everything is, she said, sounding very serious and businesslike. Memorize everything. Your life may depend on it. Look out, cried Jessie as she stepped off the bus. We're bad. We're bad. Here comes the Gamma 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 gang. Andrea just rolled her eyes and motioned for everyone to follow. They walked past Dell's Deli and the old-fashioned new fashion store, both boarded up. A strong wind blew through the street, carrying a cold and wet chill from the ocean nearby. A boy of about 10 or 11 in just jeans and a t-shirt came speeding by on a beat-up racing bike. Hey, don't you need a coat? Jessie yelled after him. I'm not cold, the boy cried without slowing down or looking back. Everyone laughed, nervous laughter. At the far end of the street, Andrea stopped in front of a large store with a bulky, solid oak coffee table in the window. Here we are, she said, smiling and pointing to the hand-painted sign above the door, Driftwood Antiques. A sign taped to the glass door said open. Andrea pulled open the door and motioned everyone inside. The store was quite large, but there was little room to walk around. It was filled with antique furniture of all description, huge cabinets and wardrobes, hard-carved desks, dining room tables, solid-looking furniture of rich wood, all which appeared to weigh at least a ton. Andrea made her way past a crushed velvet Victorian sofa to the far wall. There, several glass display cases offered an array of antique jewelry. Abby and Layla looked at each other. You're right, this has to be a movie set. It can't be real, Abby said. Layla ran her hand over the surface of a round cocktail table sculpted of dappled marble. Just the kind of light, breezy furniture to put in your summer home, she said sarcastically. Hey, anyone home? Jessie called. There's no one minding the store. Jessie, please, Andrea started, but the store owner stepped out from a tiny back office. She was a small, elderly woman, her white hair tight in a bun, wearing an attractive violet suit. She was carrying some sort of ledger book, which she dropped in surprise when she saw that her store was filled with young women. Oh my, I didn't know. She had a surprisingly young voice for someone who looked to be at least 65 or 70. Andrea bent down quickly and picked up the book for her. Thank you. I wasn't even going to open up today. There are so few people around. She set the ledger down on the marble cocktail table. We're cheerleaders. We're on a bus trip from our college in Pennsylvania, Andrea told her. It was a well-rehearsed lie. It sounded completely true. How nice, the woman said, her smile revealing lipstick-stained teeth. I'm Marie Driftwood. Yes, that's really my name. I'm the only Driftwood you'll find in this store. Ha ha. She had a little girl laugh. Well, it's a beautiful store, Andrea said. We were all admiring the jewelry. Mrs. Driftwood started to say something, but the phone in the back office suddenly rang. Oh, excuse me. Look around, girls. I'll be right back. She began scurrying through the maze of tables and sofas to get to the back office. Coming, I'm coming. Andrea smiled after her until she disappeared into the back office. Then her earnest, businesslike expression immediately returned. "There's the side entrance," she said quietly, pointing. "And there's the cash register. Memorize everything. Everything. We're doing our crime here?" Nina cried in a high little voice. "That's right, Nina," Andrea said. Her usually colorless eyes seemed to light up at the thought. "Tomorrow we're coming back here for the jewels you see in those cases, and for all the money in the cash register." "But," Nina started. "Not another word," Andrea said quietly, her eyes still blazing. "You can talk at the meeting tonight, when we decide who gets to carry the gun."